This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market stocks were trading just below record highs today. Analysts are saying some investors remain concerned about the surge in COVID-19 mutations. However, expectations of substantial fiscal aid in the United States are suddenly helping to keep the bulls in charge and will determine the next move in equities going forward. In South Africa, stocks jumping more than 2% to record highs today. They were boosted by retailer Woolworths after it forecast a large jump in its first half headline earnings per share. Woolworths did lead those gains in an index of general retailers, which we saw climbing as much as 3.2% on the day, rising for a third day. Also, Naspers advanced as much as 8.1%, the most in 10 months. It was lifted by a surge in partly owned Chinese online giant Tencent. Now, also coming up on today's show. The United States to ban travelers from South Africa over the new coronavirus variant. The World Economic Forum kicks off online. And a Kenyan duo develops a biorobotic prosthetic arm operated by brain signals. Well, we start off tonight with the United States of America, where President Joe Biden is expected to impose a ban on non-U.S. citizens who are entering the country from South Africa. Now, the ban comes into effect on Saturday. It is in an attempt to contain the spread of the new variant of COVID-19. Now, Biden will also reimpose an entry ban on nearly all non-U.S. travelers who have been in Brazil, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and 26 nations in Europe that allow travel across open borders. The new U.S. administration is expected to take an aggressive approach to combating the spread of the virus. That's after former President Donald Trump rejected mandates sought by U.S. health agencies. Now, health officials have expressed concerns that current vaccines may not be effective against the South African variant, which also raises the prospect of reinfection.
Let me be very clear. Things are going to continue to get worse before they get better. The memorial we held 2 nights ago will not be our last one, unfortunately.
Well, let's now go to South Africa and get the latest from the ground. We're joined by Angelo Coppola in Johannesburg. Angelo, good to see you as always. Now, of course, the Reuters tracker is now saying that the number of daily new infections in the country is falling by more than 3,000. But of course, land borders still remain closed. We also hear that the government services are now limited. Give us a sense of the state of affairs on the ground right now.
Well, Uche, right now, as you said, the borders are closed and they remain closed at least until the middle of February. That's for non-South Africans trying to come into the country from our neighbouring countries. There's no word yet from the President's office in terms of a presidential briefing. In terms of those government services, they are still limited. Driver's license renewals, car license renewals, as well as passports can't actually be renewed either, and that's not because of anything else, but the system is at a complete standstill right now. Offices are closed because of COVID infections. The networks and systems are also in a bit of a shambles. So for those people who have driver's license that have expired, as far as we know, there's a problem there, because if the police do stop them and they've got an expired license, they're likely to be fined or arrested. And if they're involved in an accident, it's even worse. In terms of people spending hours in queues, that's also happening as people try and get to those licensing offices, but they can't even make online bookings, as is a huge challenge at the moment. And it's made worse because there's no social distancing that's happening either in those queues. So it's a sorry state of affairs generally, Uche.
Well, how is the government reacting to the news that the COVID variant in South Africa has mutated so much that the current crop of vaccines may not be able to kill the virus, and of course the fallout from that news?
Well, look, for now, it's only Moderna that's made an announcement about their test lab results, which show that there are lower levels of antibodies than by sixfold, in fact. So it's quite a large drop in antibodies that are present in the body when they inject people with that virus to see, with the vaccine, to see how they deal with the variant 2. The Department of Health hasn't responded to our inquiries just yet. Several weeks ago, of course, we were told that there wasn't any evidence at that time that the current vaccine would be less effective. We were told that technology could be used by some pharmaceutical companies to develop a booster and to quickly reproduce it. And that's exactly what Moderna has announced that they're doing. They have this booster shot, which they're already now going to be going out to test, which will fight against the variant 2, which is known as the South African variant. It also adds to the conundrum, though, for those people or countries like South Africa, for example, who have ordered the current vaccine and they've now been exposed to the second variant or variant 2. In South Africa's case, we didn't order any Moderna vaccines, so the issue for us now is the vaccine that we have ordered, whether they've been tested on variant 2 or not, and we have to wait to see what happens with those then, Uche.
Well, the Reserve Bank did express a confidence that the second COVID-19 wave in South Africa had peaked for now. That was in its rates announcement last week. And that caused analysts to speculate that lockdown relief could follow soon. Are there any rumblings that could be coming soon?
Which are not a squeak from government circles. We know that the President calls regular meetings for his COVID Command Council, and then of course there are the regular cabinet meetings that happen once a week. That's to discuss and decide on the next steps when it comes to the lockdown relief. But there's also other cabinet business that's discussed then. We generally as media don't know when the President will call a so-called family meeting or discussion, and we only get a hint of it with a day's notice. We do know that the current lockdown is due to expire on around the 15th of February, so Ramaphosa could call an early end to the current lockdown or extend it, but it's all based on information and knowledge that he's obtaining from his circle of expertise on an ongoing basis. So we'll have to wait for the next briefing session or for the 15th of February, Uche.
Well, many thanks, Angelo, for that update. That, of course, is Angelo Coppola joining us there in Johannesburg. Meanwhile, Russia and China have approached Zimbabwe over the potential supply of COVID-19 vaccines, which is aimed at tackling the escalating outbreak in the country. Concerns continue to loom over Zimbabwe's ability to afford these shots. Zimbabwean authorities are scrambling to contain the accelerating spread of the coronavirus. Infections doubled in the past few weeks, leading to the death of 3 government ministers in the last 10 days. Now, officials are now trying to establish whether the more infectious South African variant of the virus is circulating in Zimbabwe. They fear it may have entered when thousands of citizens living in South Africa returned home for the December holidays. Now, Zimbabwe has recorded over 31,000 coronavirus cases and over 1,000 deaths, more than half reported since the beginning of this year. And moving on, Moderna Incorporation says its COVID-19 vaccine has produced virus-neutralizing antibodies in laboratory tests against new coronavirus variants, which were found in the UK and South Africa. However, the company says it will test a vaccine booster against the South African variant in preclinical trials. This is all in a bid to test efficiency in boosting antibodies against the variant and other future variants. Now, scientists have expressed concern over the mutations discovered in Britain and South Africa because they are believed to be capable of altering key functions of the virus. Well, let's now take a look at our corporate headlines today. Kenya's Kipeto Energy says it has connected the Kipeto wind farm to the national grid and it will start generating power next week. About 103 wind turbines, each capable of producing about 1.7 megawatts, will be switched on in stages, with all commercial tests due to be concluded within the next few months. This, of course, is Kenya's second largest wind power project. Meanwhile, South Africa's only female banking boss, Basani Maluleke, has quit as Chief Executive Officer of African Bank. She was also the first black woman to lead a major lender in South Africa. Now, Maluleke is expected to leave on April 30th in a bid to pursue other career opportunities after 3 years on the job. The only other woman to have led a bank in South Africa was Maria Ramos, who was the CEO of Absa Group for a decade until February 2019. Meanwhile, Steinhoff International is set to revive plans for a potential share sale of European discount retailer Pepco Group. This comes after the coronavirus pandemic caused the move to be put on hold in mid-2020. The company says that the evaluation is back underway with a range of options under consideration. It also adds that no final decisions have been made in regards to action or timing. And finally, online fashion retailer Boohoo Group has acquired British department store Debenhams. This in a cut price deal of $68.39 million. That, of course, could result in the closure of the remaining department stores. Now, this follows the announcement by Debenhams administrators in December that it would be wound down, closing all its shops after 242 years in business and putting 12,000 jobs at risk amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's take a short break now. Still to come on the show. Egypt lays the foundation for a 120-meter observation wheel called the Cairo Eye. And Premier Bank launches Somalia's first digital wallet application.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nairobi. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, Ethiopia's President Sahle-Work Zewde says her country will help Tanzania to commercialize its vast livestock in order to help them grow a leather industry. Now, Tanzania is second in its livestock numbers behind Ethiopia that leads the continent. Zewde met Tanzanian President John Magufuli during a one-day state visit in the country's Geita region. Here's CGTN's Daniel Kijo reporting.
The two presidents agreed that their governments would capitalize on the visit to exchange experiences and boost trade and investment opportunities, especially when it comes to revitalizing the leather industry. Ethiopia is Africa's leading country in terms of livestock numbers. According to Tanzania's National Bureau of Statistics, Ethiopia has 60.3 million cattle, while Tanzania is in the second position with 33.9 million cattle. President Sahle-Work Zewde says Tanzania and Ethiopia have opportunities to cooperate more on leather products.
but I can assure you that we are ready for business to really bring the relationship between Ethiopia and Tanzania to another level, to the higher level.
The Tanzanian Investment Center has registered a total of 13 projects worth $14.5 million from Ethiopia from 1990 to 2020. The two presidents also touched on the issue of illegal migration. President Magufuli, on his part, pardoned hundreds of convicted migrants from Ethiopia who have crossed into the country on their way to South Africa. He said a total of 1,789 Ethiopians will be pardoned as a goodwill gesture to strengthen bilateral ties.
We've discussed a way for them to go back home. I also have promised that we will not take any legal action against them. This is because we're neighbors and relatives.
Tanzania and Ethiopia have close ties that started in the 1960s when the two countries were under the leadership of Mwalimu Julius Nyerere and Ethiopia's Emperor Haile Selassie. The relationship formally dates back to 1963 when Tanzania opened its embassy in Ethiopia after the formation of the Organization of African Union, the forerunner of the current African Union. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And let's shift focus now. 2021 may present many opportunities for small and medium enterprises, but they should approach these with caution. A just concluded forum on the SME outlook for 2021 lists coronavirus vaccines, possibly the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and recovering economies amongst factors that support SME growth this year. It is not expected to be a walk in the park, considering how badly the coronavirus pandemic has affected the sector. Well, let's discuss this further with one of those panelists. Diana Gashaga, the managing partner of a private equity support, now joins us via Skype. Great to have you with us, Diana. Now, of course, despite these predictions that most African economies are poised to have positive GDP growth this year, some experts do say that around 60% of SMEs will close down before the COVID-19 crisis is over. Not a good outlook there. But just how much has Africa's SME sector been tested by this pandemic, and what are the realities in terms of their survival going forward?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. And I think it's very pertinent given the economic outlook that we just had discussions on this past few days. The first thing I'd like to just say is, even as it is said that 60% of the SMEs will likely close before the COVID-19 crisis is over, is to realize that the SME sector by its very nature has a high mortality rate. So it's important for us to take those figures into context. However, that said, I think what we need to also understand is, because the COVID-19 pandemic was an extreme economic shock against the fundamentals of many businesses, not only were these businesses affected at an economic level, that's on the macro level, sector level, and then individually at a company level. So it would portend that this will likely bear fruit, bear witness to the fact that, yes, 60% of SMEs might end up closing. And in terms of how they were tested, I think the key thing was just, first of all, access to capital, and not just capital in terms of working capital or financial support. Movement of human labor was interrupted. Productivity therefore had to decline. And when productivity declined and people were not able to go to work, that also affected the demand side. So as a company, you're not able to produce enough or sufficient amounts of your product or service to be able to meet your overhead costs. Your customers are therefore also not able to pay for their products and services. So this, in effect, it was like a double whammy. Everything and anything was being thrown at these companies. So when you talk about what this was what we call a worst case scenario. As people in the investment industry working with SMEs across 17 countries in Africa, this is something we always say, can you plan for your worst case scenario? So what this did was force SMEs to say, if this is my worst case scenario, I've just come through it. Did I have the proper plans in place? Did I have the proper infrastructure to help me bounce back, and to what level? So I just say that the pandemic just took away the blindfolds and forced SMEs to face their reality in terms of how they were going to make it out of these economic issues.
Well, when we talk about what the picture will look like going forward, there's a lot that has been put forward in terms of how they can adapt to this new normal and remain resilient. We talk about digital technologies, for example. So give us a sense of how the sector can thrive, especially without what you mentioned, the usual financial channels open and, of course, supply chains disrupted as a result of the pandemic.
That's actually a very good question. I think the key thing towards survival for SMEs is to just determine one thing. Where does your greatest risk lie? And then deconstruct what that means for you. So, for example, is it that I'm not able to get my goods or services from point A to B? Then what does that mean for me as an SME in terms of the redundancies and the plans that I have to make? Secondly, who are my drivers of growth? Who are my customer segments? How is the economic outlook going to impact them? So, for example, you'll find that sectors that didn't perform very well across the continent last year, for example, things like education, hospitality, tourism, they are starting from a low base. So it is expected that if any growth is to happen in some of these sectors, because they're coming for a low base, it'll seem to be more substantive. But remember, if you're coming from a negative, it always seems to be much bigger. So if you're an SME serving some of these sectors, what you might want to do is see, do I have diversity in terms of the clients that I'm serving, so that there's some sort of redundancy that's built, some risk mitigation, so that you're not tied, your fortunes as a business, your fortunes as an SME are not tied to a particular sector. And I think the other thing that will make SMEs thrive is to understand how they manage their cash flows. Obviously, financial institutions were not able to continue lending, and we saw a lot of SMEs coming in to restructure, but remembering that is only one source of capital. You need, as an SME, to understand how you can manage your cash flows, especially given the situation that the pandemic brought on us. So understanding the nitty-gritty.
Well, looks like we lost Diana there. We'll certainly try and get her back. But in the meantime, let's turn our attention to Egypt. The country has topped the list of beneficiaries from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development for a third year in a row. The London-based financial institution has invested over $8.4 billion in more than 125 projects in the country since 2015. From Cairo, here's Yasser Hakim with the details.
The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has announced that Egypt attracted the most investments from the bank in 2020. The North African state received nearly half of the budget allocated to the whole southern and eastern Mediterranean countries. Data shows Egypt accounted for more than €1 billion out of the $2.13 billion of development financing injected into 48 projects across the region.
Egypt is a very fertile land for investments at the moment. It has strong human resources and labor force. It has abundant natural resources. The steps Egypt is taking for economic reforms has been unique and has been reflected in the economic growth rates. The bank works on projects in water waste, fintech, solar energy and agricultural projects, as well as the largest solar energy firm, which is in Aswan, in partnership with the private and public sectors together.
The private sector has received a 58% share of the bank's annual support. With uncertainty still looming large on the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic and related economic downturn, the EBRD has more plans in the pipeline.
Despite the outbreak of the coronavirus, investments did not stop. In fact, they actually increased. The European Bank provided loans to Bank of Misr and the National Bank of Egypt to finance small and medium enterprises to survive the tough conditions resulting from the pandemic. Also, a new approach in Egypt is being implemented to focus on environmentally friendly projects, green projects, clean energy and clean transportation.
The latest deal struck this week is to support the ailing tourism sector that is reeling from the fallout caused by the coronavirus. Along with government support, a series of training programs, funds and consultancy for tourism entities are being put in place to keep the industry afloat. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And still in Egypt, the country has laid the foundation for its 120-meter observation wheel called the Cairo Eye. It is targeting an estimated 2.5 million visitors annually. Built on 20,000 square meters, the tourism mega project has an initial cost of $31.6 million, and it is due to be completed by 2022. Now, visitors taking the Eye for a ride should be able to see up to 50 kilometers away, with the Nile and several Cairo landmarks in view. The Cairo Eye is expected to be the largest wheel in Africa and the 5th largest globally.
Like we said, our project is called Cairo Eye. It is a tourism entertainment project. Hopefully it will be an icon at the heart of Cairo. Cairo is proud of its large historical and touristic landmarks. As a private sector company, we try to provide for the Egyptian state and match their efforts by providing a tourism entertainment project at the heart of Cairo to serve and bring in more tourists and to serve all of tourism.
We have closely studied this project to ensure facilitated traffic and to provide different means of transportation to this unique tourism place. Using Nile transportation and buses, we will also have a parking lot that can take up to 500 cars. This great project, for which we lay the foundation today, comes a great national project supported by the state aimed at creating a strategic plan for tourism growth.
And let's head to Somalia now, where Premier Bank has launched a new digital wallet application for its clients. Premier Wallet has become the first digital cash program in the country, offering the service to both account holders and non-account holders. Now, CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo has this story.
The new feature allows users to shop, pay bills, and manage digital cash while on the move. Premier Wallet, the country's first fully featured digital wallet supported by Premier Bank, is the latest addition in the country's ever-changing financial landscape. The new service is effective and popular across most local coffee shops, restaurants, and hotels. Clients request or pay money from wallet to wallet by scanning a QR code. Mohammed Ahmed Ali leads the bank's digital department and says the new feature is increasingly becoming popular among young people, who make up 70% of the country's population.
The new application is a result of the improved technology that includes smartphones. Somalia is among leading countries when it comes to mobile banking. Small business operators have welcomed the new application. It prevents fraud, with users and traders assured of safety for their money.
Dekh Saeed handles all inquiries at the call center. Her new task has been explaining how the feature works to the public. Users are required to have a valid phone number, identification document, passport photograph, and a smartphone of their choice.
At the call center, people in the country and abroad are inquiring about the new service. It has opened up the idea of internet banking among our people who are not aware of the service.
Less than 10% of the country's total population is banked according to global financial institutions. However, a huge number of the population in the country use a mobile money service. This bank now hopes that the new app will attract more young people to join the formal financial sector.
A small percentage of the Somali public is banked. The rest have no access to banking services. It is for this reason that we came up with the new Premier Wallet application. In a way, we are promoting financial literacy for those with no banks. We are also getting new clients in return.
The Premier Wallet feature is available to smartphone users on both the iOS and Android platforms. In 2015, the bank partnered with MasterCard, becoming the first international payment network to enter Somalia. Experts say the move encouraged many unbanked Somalis to join and benefit from banking services. Abdulaziz Billo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
You're watching Global Business Africa. We're going to take a short break now, but still to come on the show. The World Economic Forum kicks off, but it's all online this year. And Australians are bracing for a possible future with Google amidst conflict between the government and Google.
taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 48 hours of rain.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Just about 1:30 this hour, here's a look at other headlines. In Mozambique, a tropical cyclone Eloise has caused severe damage. Nearly 7,000 people have been displaced after thousands of houses were either destroyed or flooded. The cyclone hit the coastal province of Sofala on Saturday morning. The region's Buzi district is the worst affected. Now, severe winds and heavy rains have ruined over 130,000 hectares of crops. And in Libya, the latest round of political talks has concluded with an agreement on how to distribute leadership positions amongst the opposing factions. The meeting in Morocco brought together 13 representatives from the High Council of State in the West and 13 from the House of Representatives in the East. And in Kenya, a number of lakes have risen to levels not seen in the last 50 years. The severe flooding after months of unusually heavy rain has left thousands of people homeless and caused massive farmland destruction. Now, wildlife has not been spared. Lake Bogoria National Reserve, which boasts of flocks of pink flamingos, has seen hundreds of these birds swept off the shores on a daily basis. And January 25th marks 10 years since over 50,000 protesters first occupied Egypt's famous Tahrir Square, calling for change. The unrest lasted 18 days and led to the ousting of President Hosni Mubarak after 30 years in power. Now, on Monday, former activists reflected on the decade that has passed since the height of Egypt's revolutionary Arab Spring. And that's a look at today's top headlines. And let's turn our attention now to Davos. Chinese President Xi Jinping has delivered a special speech at the Davos Agenda 2021 virtual meeting. In it, he addressed the current global challenges, including the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, the economic fallout, and the importance of upholding multilateralism.
No global problem can be solved by any one country alone. There must be global action, global response, and global cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, the problems facing the world are intricate and complex. The way out of them is through upholding multilateralism and building a community with a shared future for mankind.
Now, besides calling for unity, President Xi also made proposals to deal with other global challenges in his video message. Zhang Yibing has more.
The world comes together at a dialogue meeting to discuss solutions to global challenges under the threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. The founder of the World Economic Forum called for immediate action.
I believe this is the best time to reset our policies and to work jointly for a peaceful and prosperous world.
Chinese President Xi Jinping shared his sentiment in his special address, calling for global action, response, and cooperation to face challenges as the world goes through what some experts have called the worst recession since the end of the Second World War.
The problems facing the world are intricate and complex. The way out of them is through upholding multilateralism and building a community with a shared future for mankind.
They called upon countries to step up coordination in macroeconomic policies, abandon ideological prejudices, and follow the path of peaceful coexistence and mutual benefits. He said public health emergencies like COVID-19 may very well recur, and global problems have to be solved with unity and consultation instead of confrontation.
To build small circles or start a new Cold War, to reject, threaten, or intimidate others, to willfully impose decoupling, supply disruption, or sanctions, and to create isolation or estrangement will only push the world into division and even confrontation. We cannot tackle common challenges in a divided world, and confrontation will lead us to a dead end.
Xi attaches great importance to the international system centered around the United Nations, as well as global order based on international law. He stressed that the world needs to give full play to the role of the World Health Organization. He also called for reforms to the World Trade Organization and the global financial system, and Xi reiterated China's commitment to the world.
We will follow a new development philosophy and foster a new development paradigm, with domestic circulation as the mainstay and domestic and international circulations reinforcing each other.
He said China will continue to implement the win-win strategy of opening up its economy to bring more opportunities to other countries and give impetus to global economic recovery and growth. Experts say 2021 will be the crucial year and hope that all sides involved in the conference can work together to rebuild trust, boost cooperation, pool ideas, and contribute to the resolution of global issues. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
And let's move on now. Global billionaires have seen their wealth soar during the COVID-19 pandemic as the world's poor face years of hardship. Now, the organization Oxfam told the World Economic Forum that there is a need to provide solutions that tackle inequality. According to the Inequality Virus report, countries have a shrinking window of opportunity to build a fair green recovery. Now, Oxfam also says that it could take more than a decade to reduce the number of people living in poverty back to pre-pandemic levels.
The Inequality Virus report really shows us that inequality has grown almost in every country in the world during this pandemic period. And it's the first time this happened since records began. So we're seeing the biggest surge in inequality during this period. And what has been so shocking is 10 billionaires, have made $500 billion during the pandemic period. So that is enough to vaccinate. You could buy vaccines to vaccinate the whole world and also prevent anybody from falling into poverty. Everybody on earth would be protected from falling in poverty through that $500 billion. Whereas for the millions and billions in poverty, it will take more than a decade, possibly 14 years for them to go back to pre-pandemic levels.
Meanwhile, the winners of the 2021 World Economic Forum Crystal Awards have been honored virtually as the ceremony moved online due to the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the Crystal Awards aims to recognize artists for exemplary commitment to improving the state of the world. This year, British-Ghanaian architect David Adjaye and Brazilian photographer Sebastião Salgado were crowned the winners. With a global economy deep in crisis, there is no shortage of topics such as soaring unemployment and debt levels, growing income inequality, and of course, climate change. And like everyone else, the WEF is pinning its hopes on normality returning and plans a face-to-face meeting in Singapore in May.
We are here together in 2021, which I consider a pivotal year, a crucial year for our future. We have the chance to move out with vaccines of the hot phase of the COVID crisis and to rebuild our economies, but we have to do so in a way that our economy and our society will be more resilient, more inclusive, and more sustainable.
We've got to a place where we have done so much, and we now are at a place where we need to do even more, to be even better than what we are. And now is the time to make a selfless world and to make a world about humanity that reaches further and deeper into a future that we can only just imagine.
I say that the most important thing for the human community around the world is the solidarity. The values of our society, they are not intellectual values. They are not material values. They are essential values. That is community, solidarity, love.
Now, China has surpassed the United States in foreign direct investment in 2020. It made the country the largest recipient of FDI in a year stricken by the pandemic. CGTN's Timothy Ulrich has the details.
China was the largest recipient of foreign direct investment in 2020. According to the report by the UN's Conference on Trade and Development, the Chinese economy brought in $163 billion in inflows, surpassing the United States, which attracted $134 billion. It said foreign investors were impressed by the way China has handled the outbreak of COVID-19.
China succeeded in combating the impact of the pandemic. As global FDI plummeted, foreign direct investment received by China increased throughout the past year.
The world economy took a battering in 2020 due to the pandemic. Overall, global FDI collapsed, dropping a massive 42% to $859 billion. To put that into context, it was a 30% fall from even the lows of the 2009 financial crisis. The one bright spark was China's recovery and how it attracted global investment. Many European companies say they want to continue investing in the Chinese market. Experts say it could lead to a much greater expansion of the Chinese economy in 2021. Timothy Ulrich, CGTN.
Now, Australians are bracing for a possible future without Google. That's as the conflict between the federal government and Alphabet's Google grows. Now, Google has threatened to block its search engine in Australia if the government proceeds with a new code that will force it and Facebook to pay media companies for the right to use their content.
Google has vowed to block users in Australia from posting or sharing links to news if the bill that would force tech companies to pay for journalism shared on its platforms was passed.
Of course they should pay. The proposition before the Australian Parliament is the product of 18 months of rigorous policy development. It's got the support of all the major parties. It's endorsed by all the major news organisations. This is good policy to regulate big tech.
This development is tied to the News Media Bargaining Code, a mandatory code of conduct to tackle bargaining power imbalances between the Australian news media businesses and digital platforms.
We operate in a democracy where our elected representatives set the laws. When there's good policy behind it, it's kind of up to all businesses to find a way of operating. I hope Google finds a way of respecting their users in Australia and recognising that a network like Google, and for that matter like Facebook, is only as strong as the people that use it.
Google has about 90 to 90% of the search engine market share in Australia, similar to the rest of the world. And its search technology also powers services such as Gmail, Google Maps and YouTube.
It is a bit of a worry, isn't it?
But, as I say, what can we do about it?
Most of the businesses we get for our online coming through Google Ads, Google Analytica coming through. So it'll be interesting to see how things pan out. It's just the start of it, so let's just see.
Australia's firm stance to challenge online giants puts the nation as a forerunner in the campaign to regulate tech companies.
Well, I think if a business wants to do, or if a company wants to do business in Australia, then they should adhere to whatever our laws are. If the government is saying they want them to pay for the news content, then yeah, they should pay, because if they want to do business here, that's our rules.
Google has called the code overly broad and said that without revisions, offering even a limited search tool would be too risky. The company does not disclose sales from Australia, but search ads are its biggest contributor to revenue and profit globally. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
On that note, let's take a look at commodity markets today. Gold prices gaining as the dollar eased. And of course, investors are hoping that a huge economic stimulus in the US will be passed. Now, the rise in global coronavirus cases is also supporting the precious metal as countries struggle to increase the pace of vaccinations. Meanwhile, oil prices edging up today as supply jitters and US stimulus plans offset fresh concerns about the hit to global fuel demand from those renewed lockdowns. Traders say oil prices now have good reasons to start the week with gains as they capitalize on a bullish cocktail of news today. Well, let's take a short break. Still coming up. Look at the Kenyan duo that with an invention that steps closer towards a fully functional prosthetic arm.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba, Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, the South African government is once again attempting to properly regulate the minibus taxi industry in the country. For years, the industry has been plagued by violence over routes and increased competition. Now, minibus taxis are the most common mode of public transport in the country, ferrying up to 15 million commuters daily. Here's CGTN Sumitra Naidu reporting.
There's an estimated 250,000 minibus taxis in South Africa.
While this is an important mode of transportation, the industry is not properly regulated and taxi drivers are not protected under South African labour law.
I'm a taxi driver at Barra City and have been for over 20 years. We don't have a signed contract stating that we work for a taxi owner. It is black business. When you get hired, it's usually verbal contract. The taxi owner gives you his card and says drive.
Over 350,000 people work in the taxi industry, making it the largest employer across the transport sector in South Africa. Taxi drivers make up the bulk of workers, but have no protection under the country's labour laws. The Department of Labour hasn't been available to comment.
I'm a taxi driver. Taxi driving hours start from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. If there are still people, a taxi is not allowed to be parked, especially if there are still people in the street or people coming from work. So we have to take workers home and we can't sleep if they still need transportation. We work over 10 hours because we work with the community and we have to take everyone home back to their families.
Taxi drivers are often caught speeding in order to drop off and fill up again. This leads to hundreds of taxi accidents. According to the Automobile Association of South Africa, of the 36 people that die on the roads daily, 3 are killed in taxi incidents. Most of these vehicles are also old and unsafe to be on the roads. Taxi drivers and their passengers are at risk every day.
Only when you're sick. Apart from that, passengers every day travel all year round. Even during Christmas, they even travel to KZN, for example, unless you speak to your employer and get a few days to spend with your family on Christmas.
A national taxi Lekgotla was held late last year, and it was resolved that urgent changes need to be made. There will be more funding from government and taxi operators will be asked to pay tax. The Transport Minister says a new improved taxi industry will be in place by April this year. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, 2 Kenyan inventors have created a biorobotic prosthetic arm which is operated by brain signals. The innovation could play a significant role in assisting people living with physical disabilities with their day-to-day activities. Here's CGTN's Joy Kiruki Juma with the story.
You could mistake this for a scene in a sci-fi movie. But this robotic arm is a creation of 2 Kenyan university dropouts, David Gathu and Moses Kenywa.
This is an anaparimb biorobotic hand prosthetic that uses brain signals to locomote its hand, to move the hand according to your desires. This biorobotic hand uses those brain signals and converts those brain signals, amplifies them, filters them, then converts them into electronic current, and this electronic current is further pushed forward to the circuit of the robot, meaning it can convert user's thought into robotic arm movement.
The arm is made from recycled wood and other materials. It can move vertically and horizontally. Over 1 million people in Kenya live with disabilities. Some have lost limbs in accidents and others to polio. Gathu and Kenywa were motivated to offer a solution.
When we were growing up together, we saw that the people living with disability in the towns, in the villages, they are going through a lot of difficulties in their mobility, in their day-to-day mobility, and in doing their daily activities. Also, using the God-given talent that we had, we tried to see what we can do in order to help them, to aid their mobility, to aid their day-to-day activities.
Gathu and Kenywa dropped out of university due to lack of fees. That did not discourage them though. Instead, they taught themselves the skills needed to make the arm. David Geshimu, who heads the rehabilitation clinic at the Association for the Physically Disabled of Kenya, claims the innovation is revolutionary.
First of all, let me mention the prosthetic, especially in terms of upper limb prosthesis, is one aspect that we have been missing, or we have been really slow in terms of rehabilitation. But such invention of prosthetic arms and such level of technology will go in a big way, not just improving our economy in terms of production, but also making it more acceptable to society. It's not bulky. It's not bulky. It's easier for the persons with the ability to handle them. It's quite a game changer in terms of amputation and rehabilitation.
An innovation that could be life-changing, but one which Kenywa and Gathu say is hampered by a lack of funds needed for mass production. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
And before we leave you, a quick look at Africa's currencies today and a spotlight on the rand. It fell about 0.6% as investors weighed the possibility of more coronavirus-related lockdowns in the country. Still, the currency remains attractive due to relatively higher interest rates than most other emerging market economies. Well, that is it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.